Hello and good evening, everybody. Now, I think we've had a few bandwidth issues tonight between YouTube and between Zoom, but I've just rebooted everything. I've put another 10 pence in the meter. I think we're okay. I've just checked over into YouTube and I can see myself, which is a good sign. So without further ado, and with apologies from me for that little technical glitch, which in terms of glitches, I think is definitely thematically in keeping with this beautiful book we are launching tonight. There is certainly no glitches in the poetry itself, though, I have to say, which is perfect. From Cynthia Miller, Honorifics. I'm absolutely delighted to be here this evening, launching this wonderful book with our beautiful, very much Romalyn Ante, who sadly can't be with us this evening, but we will be honouring Romalyn's wonderful poetry in other ways this evening also. What a wonderful evening and what a great set of readers. We're so pleased to be launching this beautiful book this evening. And I'm so delighted to be here with you all on YouTube. I've seen lots of lovely messages already popping up on our messages. Please do keep those going. It's lovely to see those. And even though we are here and we're broadcasting digitally from our front rooms and our various spaces, it's always really, really heartwarming to see all of your messages. It really does matter. And it's a really important thing. Over the last year, lots of our poets have launched books online through these YouTube events, and it's been such a wonderful, important thing to be able to do that. So we're very delighted to have you all joining us this evening. Thank you very much. And without further ado, wonderful audience, I'd like to declare this wonderful launch open. Please come in, make yourselves at home, pour yourself a glass of something nice, pull up a footstool and enjoy a wonderful evening of poetry. So to introduce tonight's readers, we will have readings, as I've mentioned, from our special guests, Jenna Clake and Khairani Barokka. I'm also mindful of a wonderful poet, Romalyn Ante, who would have been joining us tonight, but sadly can't. But before we go any further, I do both have a poem and a message from Romalyn that I would very much like to share. So first of all, with Romalyn's permission, I'd like to read a poem from her wonderful collection, which is called Antiometic for Homesickness. It was published last year. It's a really, really beautiful book. Romalyn was a Primus poet a couple of years ago, as Cynthia was as well, and has been a Nine Arches Dynamo poet as well. Also one of the West Midlands really valued poets as part of our writing community. Romalyn is such a great writer, and it's been brilliant seeing her poetry find national and international audiences alike, and not least seeing her on the Jalak Prize shortlist as well, which was absolutely brilliant. So I'd like to kick off this evening, if I may, by reading this poem, The Making of a Smuggler, from Antiometic for Homesickness by Romalyn Ante. Wherever we travel, we carry the whole country with us. Our rice terraces are folded garments. We have pillars of trees, a rainforest on a hairbrush. We dig alamasag crabs out of the sand and use them as tabs to zip our bags. We, immigrants, are experts in packing. It's in our genes. If the border office stops us, let him dive into our belongings like a man trying to fish in an ocean ruled by sharp corals, stinging anemones. Let the smell of old socks swirl up like bats. He can squeeze the yellow packet harder and not know it's pig's blood. He won't hear the squeal as he chucks it aside. He wasn't there, mud-soaked in a pen, chasing after the erratic swine. The officer might ask, no sauce, no chicken feet, with a broken accent, as if it would be easier for us to understand. But he can't smell my hands, see the sediments under my nails, fermented fish and all we dip in it. He can't cup his ear with my palm and hear the surfs of Sarago Beach. He can't follow me through the gate, even with his gaze. He'll miss the gleam of a red quill in my lug sole, as when he didn't hear my uncle's knife grind back and forth on a whetstone, or how he slit the neck of my rooster to teach me about survival. The officer did not feel the pot of hot water getting lighter when I poured it over the carcass. He wasn't there at that moment, where I ripped out the feathers I once used to caress. A wonderful poem by Romelin Ante from Antiometic for Homesickness. Please do buy yourself a copy of this wonderful book. I will be saying that a fair few times this evening, and I mean it. So this is a really fantastic collection. You know, that do treat yourself to this book. It's incredible. And before I go any further, I have a message for Cynthia from Romelin. Cynthia, Romelin says, "Congratulations on your launch. I'm so sorry I can't read tonight, but I wanted to say I'm very happy for you and so proud of what you've achieved. From the night we had a little dinner at my house 4 years ago and talked about poetry, ideas and dreams over an Uber ice cream, I've always known that your work will be special. Honorifics is a book that beautifully encapsulates memory, Greek mythology, distant stars and the examination of celebration of personhood and family. Most of all, Honorifics has such a big heart. Every poem in this book left me with a real sense of wonder and appreciation. Thank you for bringing such beautiful work. And again, many congratulations." Lovely message there from Romelin for you, Cynthia. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome our next wonderful guest for this evening, another poet whose work I've had the real privilege of working with for a number of years, Khairani Barokka, whose beautiful collection, Ultimatum Orangutan, was published not that long ago, back in March. So you can also watch Khairani's Oka's launch of that book as well on our YouTube channel. Please do. There's a wonderful event that you can watch back. And we're really proud to have published Khairani Barokka's poems previously as well in a collection called Rope. And Oka has also been editor of Stairs and Whispers, one of the co-editors of that really important anthology of poetry by disabled and deaf writers. So I'm really delighted to be welcoming her this evening. And to tell you a little bit more about Khairani Barokka, she's a writer and artist from Jakarta, based in London. Her work has been presented widely in more than 15 countries. Among Oka's honours, she was Modern Poetry and Translation's inaugural Poet in Residence and is currently Associate Artist at the National Centre for Writing and Research at UAL's Decolonising Arts Institute. Oka's books include Indigenous Species from Tilted Axis, with a Vietnamese translation by Ajar Press, Stairs and Whispers, D-Deaf and Disabled Poets Write Back as co-editor, Rope, and most recently, of course, Ultimatum Orangutan. Will you please give a big welcome to the wonderful Khairani Barokka.
Thank you so much, Jane. Congratulations, Cynthia. It's so nice to be here alongside Jenna, and thank you, Angela, behind the scenes. I'd like to begin by saying, Cynthia sayang. I love that this book, Honorifics, is literally bookended by love. The first poem is sayang/sayang, which means love, and the last poem is Voicemails from My Mother, which also has the word sayang. And as Romelin said, that says it all. You know, it's a heart-filled book. To quote you describing your mother, this book is sulfur fruit, sharp and bright as lightning in a dry season, a whole wildfire blowing hard out ahead, clearing the way. I hope you won't mind my appropriation of those words. Even the pith is sweet. Okay, last quote from this wonderful book. Please buy it. Honorifics by Cynthia Miller, shortlisted for the Forward Prize, Eric Gregory Award. Okay, I'm going to read from my book, Ultimatum Orangutan, which is out with 9 Arches. It's an honor to be here. As I said, it's so nice. Cynthia is someone who always feels like home when I talk to her. So this is entitled Pylons. I am writing from a drowning ship. I am infested with burnt and breaking pylons, a shock to the limbic system of a rainforest. I am fracked nervous systems. I am writing from the underwater debris of a coral reef blasted, am enraptured, fascinated by the glow of a supernova that is our own destruction. I am the palms of your mother in the dead of night, when all rushes to extinction and constellations swarm your body, reminding you of what is here still. This is entitled In Which I Hypnotize a Tiger. Not made for Blake quotes and Tinder profiles. Not squandered for bullets slung as attempts at gumption. Not slit with knives on colonist orders, then strung up. Not sold to a venture capitalist who'll place her pale feet in heels and on you. Not vanishing. Not a chipmunk-cheeked emoji. Not bedtime threat to children in cold climates. Not CGI recreation with an underappreciated actor voicing you. Not a bevy of ill-advised tattoos. Not The Hangover. Not sports team embodiment. Not Go Get 'Em. Not taxidermy. Not species forgotten. Not a name used for foreplay. Not a fantastic form of balm for soothing creaking muscle tissue. Not a totem for my calming alone. Not tired and misunderstood and hiding and rotting and gone. Scream without shame or fear of banishment. This is no forest of wounding, tribulation, dust of your bone. Lick your paws, open your eyes. This is entitled Natural History Museum. Edmontosaurus coelacanth animatronic hypnotists stand vigil over lone paragraph, cocoon-wrapped, on indigenous peoples' uncredited boon to European science. Dissected human women then throng display halls. Our feathered reptiles, mineral keychains, armadillo taxidermy, empress arachnids, espresso queues to purchase donation, Latin lingua franca of ancient skewed orders, visitors to Kensington allowed to fly home upon quiet capture by gift shops and CCTV. The key to survival is L. The cause of extinction is G. Ghost orchid is wisdom. Her presence, skeletal, rules all chances of escape in the living from spirit preservation in transparent jars. Wanted to get a flower in there since Cynthia's the kind of friend who sends lots of flowery temporary tattoos and puts them on her book. The event. When Skystone fell into the earth, the smoke blackened all of Celestial Dome. Tree bark grew thick with scales of ash. The heat rose, water flew, boiling ether choked the beasts, and they collapsed into mass graves set in this lone blue marble, weighted in the depths as calcium. Cainosauric era begun with the largest of endings. Botany and fauna slain punto, Zeus's grenades slung across the Cretaceous tertiary boundary, now Ukraine, now Mexico, now North Sea, now west of Mumbai, and the Deccan traps sparking ruby volcanoes, rattling maniacally, suffocating leaves. I sit in wonky wheelchair museum provided, my friend vertical behind me. Tyrannosaurus Rex moves his silly twin forelimbs about before us, electric strands moving his painted neck, head aloft like a chicken's. We missed them by too many millions of years. We rebuilt from hunch and stringed paths connecting phyla. Preferential choice to resurrect those with eyes, a menace in their paws, phylum Chordata. My friend will buy me a tear-shaped stone in the shop, tinged just like Sugu's orange-flavored candy. And we'll lie down, discuss vile scourge that's human populace, apologize quietly to theropod dinos, descendants eaten with sweet potato fries. So this is a poem that Cynthia likes, so I'm reading it. It's called Poem with Panic Affirmations. I need to sleep on the ping pong table with a pillow that says, "We work." I need to sleep after ayahuasca to maximize plunder of the Jambi rainforest from Palo Alto. I need to ease into dreaming with Tony Robbins supplements. Holding patterns 1. Finally, clicking ad perpetuum rears its whirling head, and I gasp awake after mere 5 minutes of the same dream, fall back swiftly into same dream to mine for consciousness 5 minutes later. This continues in 2 stages, a couplet of mirages punctuated by the night as it is. Neither are remembered, save for their panic, a witch's hands grasping the wrists, your neck, but to tell you. This resetting awake is occurring in the same part of the brain that scrolls through tabs too much, too often, summoning murderous snoozing tics, a crashing clackety. Newfound determination to persist with long reads. 2. The medicine before bed induces nightmares, or at least the worry-headed horses. Recently, I was in Melbourne again, but confused as to bus and train schedules, enter a tram that turns into bus not likely, cavernous inside. With a darkened movie theater, passengers are hostile, snapping, dirty looks. I flee the scene and spill into sun-flooded street not recognized. It might have been the 50s. Hats. 3. I am stalked by a husband who is made of stone. Emerging from underwater rapids and our chasecapade hijinks, I run from a rock formation and to a riverbank hostel, not looking back to see if a man of wet mineral mess is pounding at my heels. 4. And then at age 32, so far from Jakarta, I'm reminded that jinn exist here as well. Or it's one of my relatives deceased checking in on a woman's slumber nest. Vision comes, the first non-stressful in round about 2 years. There's a house in Indonesia, airy on the first floor, white walls and tiles, and my darling aunt opens the door to me. I wake up suddenly and realize the weight of a human being sitting on the edge of my duvet looking at my head. I cannot see it, but sense it. Absolutamente. Yell, ya Allah, in abject adrenaline. It flies off, sends me back to sleep. Now in this one, a tight, tiny table where brother is small and I am 12, and my parents are in their early 40s, close friends of theirs and those families' children, all of us thigh to thigh, eating lunch piled deep with hands and chopsticks. Feast on this one. This has joy too, but in this one, the spirit has left. Jinns are made of a fiery plasma. This one seemed to have known me from small-hearted beginnings, or it was a grandmother, both of whom let me envelop their papery waists in small arms to nod off silent, so both of us could grow. I need to sleep on the treadmill. I'll explode into several acute pain days if I use the treadmill for 15 minutes, but disabled women don't get booked in ads that have to settle for less than Taylor Swift. When my Formula One championship win arrives, I'll chug an energy drink that means no sleep for the wicked in the sponsorship deal. I'll be seeing you, won't let bed bugs bite. This last one is entitled Epitaph. The Great Barrier Reef comes knelling to the reaper, and now Antarctica. Everything's a crumble. Come hither, says the angel at the gates, revealing not lustlessness, more on this later. A friend who only wanted to make the animals feel much better around him was buried today, and his son will remember. We'll be gone if the end days are soon, as we're in our 30s, someone says to me post-funeral. Thinking about the end is not the point of flowing arteries. A reaching out for a friend who leaves must turn some slights to bludgeons. And last year I witnessed a family saying it was fine for a baby to hit other children. Whole languages dying, while I hypocritically write in one I refuse to speak with my mother. Come hither, says the angel at the gates. I am of a sex that does not yet exist in the world of Homo sapiens. I made God give me revelatory light between these legs, so when you arrive, you will know there is still the new. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oka, for that wonderful, wonderful reading. Those poems, just the energy with which you read them as well, they just really stop you in your tracks and beckon you to listen, and listen up well. They're just so powerful. What a delight to hear you read. Thank you very much, Oka. That was just wonderful. And just to remind anyone who enjoyed that wonderful reading that you can buy Oka's recent collection, Ultimatum Orangutan in the Nine Arches shop, and also her other collections as well. Absolutely delighted to host that wonderful reading. Thank you. Our next reader this evening is Jenna Clake. To tell you a little bit about Jenna, who has also recently, I said this is going to be a reading full of books you must buy, this wonderful collection from Blood Axe, just published, Museum of Ice Cream, which is her second collection. So to tell you a little bit about Jenna, her debut collection of poetry, Fortune Cookie, won the Melita Hume Prize, and she has received an Eric Gregory Award from the Society of Authors for the same collection also. Jenna was shortlisted for the Somerset Maugham Award for that collection too, and her second full collection, as mentioned, is this wonderful new book, The Museum of Ice Cream. I realise one thing also that links a lot of our readers this evening is that the first Verve Poetry Festival, of which more in a moment I will mention. I remember very fondly sitting with Oka, doing an event around her collection Indigenous Species, in conversation on the second floor of Waterstones in Birmingham, possibly the third floor, I'm not very good with floors, and having a lovely conversation. Also the first time I saw this next poet, Jenna Clake, read. So a lovely kind of sense of connection this evening between all of these readers, that at various points we've all, although we can't physically be in the room together today, we have at various points, with great thanks to Verve Poetry Festival, frequently been in each other's company and frequently enjoyed each other's company. And a common factor also being Birmingham, of course, in that. So without further ado, please welcome our next wonderful reader, Jenna Clake.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. Cynthia, congratulations on this wonderful book and launching it. Cynthia is such a poet of such, I think, tenacity and I want to say playfulness, but I'm not sure I feel that's the right word. But what I want to say really is that I'm always in awe of the way that Cynthia is ambitious with her poetry and experiments with her poetry, and also the way that she is such a good member of community in the poetry world, bringing us the festival, helping me edit my book. It wouldn't be here without her, and also just being a good poetry champion for lots of people I know. So I've done a similar thing to Oka and picked poems I think Cynthia might like from my book. I suppose one note about my book to mention is I like to think that all the speakers of my poems are characters, they're not me. So that's something I just like to caveat with. How much longer until I get this out? You are eating fig rolls because your mother thinks you like them, as she does, and she wraps them in napkins like slices of cake. You found the fig rolls in the pocket of your bag, and you want her to keep on buying them so you are never able to tell the truth, so that you eat them until they remind you of her, and you have grown to like them, like you taught a boyfriend to like olives and then to like mushrooms, as though this were improving him as a person. But really, he was lactose intolerant, as was the other woman he was fucking. So my collection is in part thinking about food, but also it's sort of a half kind of coming to terms with moving to Newcastle collection. I left my lovely home of Birmingham and was coming to terms with living somewhere else. And this is a poem inspired by a very lonely summer and wandering into a Greggs by a park to just talk to somebody, anybody. Self-portrait as the opening of a window on a hot morning. 3 men carry a large snake home between them. This morning, the pantry was empty again, the sun in the sky like a lemon slice. They daydream of fried potatoes, mayonnaise like sun cream. The youngest of the men, a boy, asks the oldest of the men, his father, to describe the following items: walnut, peach, salt, goat's cheese, apple. The father says, tremendous loss, tremendous chaos, tremendous emptiness, tremendous cracker, tremendous yellow, and thinks of a woman who always slept on the sofa as he cleaned her windows. Her legs like caramel from a tin, another life. The other man, also a boy, the eldest boy, and also the son of the father, looks at people in the park, all in pairs or groups. There is a wedding party. He sees the bride's head over the rows of anemones, violas, and benches, her hair like a stick of licorice. He thinks of how he has a particular tree to sit under, how he has spent whole days under there. If he sits alone all day and talks to no one, does he exist? Sometimes he scavenges change to buy a bottle of water just to have spoken. Later, his parents cut the snake into rations. He spins the snake skull around his finger. His mother asks if he wants something to drink, and he believes he has responded. When he sees the steam rising from their mugs of broth, he accuses her of forgetting him, goes outside, walks to the river, and unsticks a limpet. I think Cynthia told me this was her favourite poem in my book, so if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I think I'm right. Like other women. You might come out of your house dressed as a clown and meet another girl your age dressed as a clown. As you might go to the cinema together dressed as clowns and not eat popcorn. As you might, wearing your clown costumes underneath, try on new clothes and point out to each other where the clown suit is showing. As you might go to a restaurant and ask for 2 empty plates and roll your red noses around them. As you might, sitting in her bedroom as she is in the bathroom, find a drawer filled with eggs and oranges. As you might, whilst throwing up in the bathroom, worry about her finding your drawer filled with chocolate. As you might send emails to keep each other on track. As you might direct each other to websites about how to be better clowns. As you might stop talking to your other friends in order to spend more time with her. As you both might wake up early to go for a run dressed as clowns. As you might want to take off your clown suit, but know that you need the other one to undo the zip. As you might hug each other at the end of the day, and at the same time check that the other one is still wearing all the parts of her costume. This is more of a love letter to Newcastle than my earlier poem, although probably still a bit ambivalent. I try to make sense of things by standing very close to windows. Morning felt like an ungraceful attempt to pull myself onto the side of a swimming pool. I wanted to dream of sash windows, iced coffee mixing with milk, a yellow cup and buttercream, the cold air hitting the room kindly. I was asked to draw around my silhouette in profile. I was shocked and frightened by the shape of my nose. I wondered how to make my life better and concluded that all I needed was a white apartment and a couple of chairs, 3 slices of quiche, a lily pad of desire. It was too cold to go in the sea, but too warm to wear a coat. I touched white scarves until I became vanilla. Like seagulls roosting on thin ledges, bridges, Everyone was pregnant or dying or wrongly visiting a deli counter looking for the perfect peach. I took a photo of my silhouette. It was a friend covering their face with an umbrella, blue and white striped curtains knocking over a vase, a woman leaving the pharmacy crying. I tapped the powder from a custard donut onto a plate. It was like being given permission to grow my body hair. It had something to do with respect. And to finish off, I have picked a poem that I think, if I may, sounds a bit like it could be a Cynthia Miller poem for all its consideration of detail and colour and food and wonderful objects. Garments I have dreamed of but will never wear. A beige Macintosh hanging on the back of the door. I am waiting for the person. The peeling of a squash or the folds of their dark green scarf. Squares of light on the wall, or the person tucking in the labels sticking out the back of my dress. A lemon-shaped trinket dish, or an enamel pot for tea. Oysters cracked open on an unmade bed of noodles. The feeling that I am doing something very, very wrong with the person. Then the person's jumper with fluff of a dandelion and figs sliced open, inner lip pink. Or I am standing at a pedestrian crossing looking up at the person, wanting to touch their sleeve. Or the person turns to me as I am driving, listening to what I say. Thank you and congratulations, Cynthia. Please buy the book.
Thank you so much, Jenna. That wonderful reading, that great ravenous mix of quiche and lemons and ice cream and chocolate. I actually feel kind of hungry and slightly giddy all at once. They're just such wonderfully imaginative poems. Thank you so much. We really enjoyed that. Before I go to our next reading, which will be Cynthia's reading, just to add that we are going to do a Q&A after Cynthia's reading. So please, audience, do contribute your questions in the Q&A on the chat on YouTube. And also just say it's wonderful to see so many of you here. So just to let our poets know that we've also got people attending this evening from Chicago, from Glasgow, from Cork. We've got Bath, Edinburgh, Northumberland, Walsall, Forest Hill, London, Norwich, Glasgow, Brixton, Copenhagen, Surrey, I think all corners of the various internet worlds for us. So absolutely brilliant to have audiences from all over the place attending this evening. So it's lovely to see you there. Thank you everybody who's joining us live. If you want to watch this video, this launch will be available as well. If you've missed anything, if you want to go back to the beginning, please do check back. This will be left up on YouTube for you to watch at your leisure and enjoy again later, to share with people. Do share it online. And yes, we will have a Q&A. So have a think if there are questions you'd like to ask. We'll be hosting that after Cynthia's reading, and you're welcome to ask questions of Cynthia, of Jenna, of Oka. So please do let us know a few things that you'd like to ask the poets about their books. So without further ado, that brings us to tonight's headline reader, Cynthia Miller, who's launching her wonderful book, Honorifics, this evening. I normally like to say a few words really at this point about the writer, about how I know them, about their work, and how I've come to know their work as well. And it's with great pleasure to talk about Cynthia tonight, and to say how very pleased I am to be presenting this book and presenting Cynthia's first full collection. I've known Cynthia for quite a long time, actually, because she was in the first ever group of students I taught at University of Warwick in, I think, 2013, or was it 2010? Sorry, my memory is appalling, but it was a real joy to teach Cynthia in her first year at Warwick. And then also much later on to get a text message that said, "Hi, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm living in Birmingham now, and I wonder if there's any poetry groups I could join, because I'd be really keen. So from that point on, the joyous thing of Cynthia joining a poetry group that we had in Warwick and joining various other poetry groups in Birmingham also. One of the things to really say about Cynthia as a writer is how very active she is as a writer wherever she goes, how very much part of every community she is, every community of writers that she joins. And such a real pleasure to get to know her. Cynthia is a very bold and determined and skillful writer and poet, and one who has spent many years honing and refining her work. She's also a really generous, dynamic and brilliant activist for poetry. She co-founded the Verve Poetry Festival in Birmingham, and it's that great vision, her vision for a distinct and vibrant and inclusive new kind of poetry festival, that was realised in full within what Verve does and continues to do. And wonderful also then several years later with Jacob Samler Rose as editor for Primers Volume 2 to come across Cynthia's work again and to publish it alongside Ben Bransfield and Marvin Thompson. Marvin, as you know, National Poetry Competition winner, and Ben Bransfield, who has a brand new collection pamphlet out with the poetry business called The Judder Men, which I also recommend. Sorry, this is turned to a very expensive book night for some of our viewers. I do apologise. But back to Honorifics, and to say that what is really special for me about this wonderful book is that it is equally an act of dynamic imagination and care and vision. These are poems that crackle with epic imagery, glitchy and technologically aware. They bloom with jellyfish and flowers and food and flavour and voyages and constellations and deep oceans and bone china. They give voice to the experience of migration, of dislocation, of the strong bond of family, of language and culture, even the very names by which we call and we honour our most beloved. These are also sharply observed, shrewd political poems, unafraid of examining the hostile environment, looking closely at the malignant paradox at the heart of the Home Office, the damage that is caused by government policies on immigration. It's in this supercharged mix, kaleidoscopic imagination brought to refocus and reframe those serious matters of place, identity, discrimination, that enables this moment of complete, clear, visioned realization, incisive enough to make you catch your breath in awe. Just as Jacob Samler Rose himself says, this is the kind of poetry that leaves the poet in me dizzy with jealousy and admiration. Ultimately, Cynthia, these are poems that are rich and rewarding, full of celebration and joy and love, the power of persistence. Let us toast you, Cynthia Miller, and your wonderful debut collection, Honorifics. Please read for us.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Angela, and Jane and Akka and Jenna. I'm kind of overwhelmed right now, and just so grateful and so honored to be reading with you guys. These poets and their poems mean such a lot to me. So it's just such a pleasure to be reading with you and to reading for everyone on YouTube. Hi, thanks for joining us. The first poem I'm going to read is called Social Distancing, and a lot of this collection was written in kind of a blur during lockdown 1 last year. So they really speak to distance and longing and that weird sense that everyone was moving through time in a very strange fashion. Anyways, this is Social Distancing. It was the epoch of transmutation. Some evenings the neighbors turned into jaguars and dragged their dinner up into the trees. You could touch anything you wanted and watch it change. A bench became a hammerhead shark. Confetti became slices of wet ham. A post box, a baby grand piano. Where town hall once stood, now was a giant baklava oozing honey. Someone turned their arm into long tentacles of squirming fingers and went trawling, terrorizing the streets by grasping everything in reach. We were afraid to venture out of our homes. Everything became a record of what we touched or hadn't, where our hands lingered or didn't, how much distance we could afford to put between ourselves and others, what it cost us, what it didn't. From Earth, we are going to move to outer space, to Proxima b, more specifically, which is the closest exoplanet to our solar system. And this poem opens with an epigraph from Carlo Rovelli and his book, The Order of Time, which is a really beautiful book about astrophysics and space and time. This is Proxima b. Say, for the purposes of this example, I'm on Proxima b and you're on Earth. I'm lying on my front in the sleeping pod with a satellite phone tucked under my chin, kicking my legs, asking you what you're doing right now. The now is important. I'll return to this later. I can hear the familiar clatter of you moving around the small kitchen, opening drawers, munching on sweet chili crisps as you peek at dinner in the oven. My longing telescopes. I pretend I'm right there with you. According to physics, there is no universal now, because light takes 4 years to reach Earth from Proxima b, the closest star to the sun. What I'm doing right now is 4 years in your future from the moment you hear my voice, and your right now happened 4 years ago for me. If we were to hold a conversation, what I say and your reply back to me would take 8 years. There is an extended present that is neither past nor future, and it's in that elsewhere that I make my home. My longing telescopes. My flat becomes an infinite spaceport, one continual liftoff fever dream. Every port is less of a place to move through and more a state to slip into. Hello and welcome to the endless country of always leaving your heart behind. Whatever I'm doing now is still 4 years away for you. We are the slowest moving storm, a study in otherworldly patience and longitudinal data. Space is expanding faster and faster, and that is no comfort either. The fundamental asymmetry between a moment on Proxima b and the concept of a present here and now on Earth is a stress fracture broken over and over again. Home, here, there, you, me, past, future, present, now, is a series of dislocations, and dislocations are never temporary. I fall out of love with now. What it is like to love someone in outer space. Have you seen that video of an astronaut wringing out a wet towel? All that water squeezed out with nowhere to fall. Say one day I finally land back on Earth and walk straight into your arms, wrung out with relief. Later that evening, we look through a telescope together and spot me on Proxima b, light years in the past, waving back at us. It's a feat of timing and engineering ingenuity and sweet talking my way into borrowing office equipment for one night. Forgive me, this is just a thought experiment. Say for a moment I exist at 2 points. One, a solid line of heat at your side, and another, a wink of light in the sky, already racing back to you. And this is the only now I'm grateful for. The physics of space-time doesn't care what our urgent human questions are. Are you on your way home? I miss your voice. Can you speak now? Have you eaten yet? I wait 8 lousy years for an answer. My skin hunger could fill a galaxy. I think I'm going to do one more lockdown poem, and then that's enough of those. So from outer space, we're going to move to the underworld. And peppered throughout this collection are poems that draw on Greek myth and women of Greek myth and really reimagining their voices. And this feels like a poem that really only could have been written in lockdown. Eurydice video calls her lover in lockdown. Seeing each other like this doesn't count. We aren't breaking any divine rules. Look all you want. Everyone here is on a long distance call, speaking to someone already slipping out of memory. O is showing me a tiny succulent he thought was a goner. His hands are gorgeous. A suggestion of palm on screen, holding a red flower on a leggy plant, surging towards light. One etiolated thing looking at another. I want you to hang up, defy the gods, touch me. I'm downright ravenous. You think it's bad up there? Baby ghosts just pass through each other, yearning, yearning, yearning. I want you to carry me out of here, bridal style or fireman lift. I'm not picky. I'm waiting for the all clear. Someone to shout, ollie ollie oxen free. Won't you come out, Eurydice? I'm not sure what I want more, certainty, or to finally set down this longing. This next poem, I think it's about, actually I lied, it is another lockdown poem, but it's about longing and relationships and that sense of yearning, and wanting to be together, and that sense of time and moving through time very strangely. I'm just going to read the poem, actually. It does a lot better job of me than me trying to explain it. If given a choice, my boyfriend wants to be immortal. The opposite of death isn't being a god, it's not caring about change. No, I want the full terror and joy of life hurtling through me. Broken arm, pink cast, jelly legs when the elevator loses power. I want to swim out into deep waters like I'm striking out, swinging for the fences. I want to grow old with you. I want to see your hair go salt and pepper. I want to chide you about sunscreen until we are as wrinkled as old plums or the chestnut mushrooms I rescue from the back of the crisper. I want all the terror, all the sweetness. I want the urgency zinging through me. I want to be a small meteor shower. No great comet so dazzling as to garner a god's attention, just bright enough to make you smile. I want to drive through fields crammed with sunflowers in a French convertible and red lipstick and feel sexy and sun-warmed and so turned on by your right hand on the gear shift. I'm a swarm of summer cicadas crawling out of my skin. I even want the email from my dad writing to say he is free from the cancer we didn't know he had in the first place. I want to know it won't last, but we chose to be in it, fully in it, cannonballing until the water closes up above our heads. What's this to a lifetime of lives? What's infinite time to a multiplicity of universes? How could you ever think eons would compare to this? I mentioned I'm slightly obsessed with Greek mythology, and this is a little strange guzzle. Moon goddess guzzle. A man walks into the forest for the last time. The air smells portentous, like wet dog. He moons over me, dumbstruck. In paintings, I'm always startled and doe-shy, a naked slip of crescent moon. Now dryads are catcalling in the trees. No, they're whistling his deer hounds to their dinner. Under this petty moon, honey burns, mint curdles. I'm one long nettle scream. Sorry for the abject chaos, I needed the attention. Full moon craziness is licking lightning or unzipping your sternum to find a black bear baying. Good moon goddesses aren't meant to wear lycra shorts under dresses, shed antlers, talk back to the dark. I'm moonlighting under one of my lesser names these days. Cynthia, what quickens in the night? Blood, hunger, a hunter's moon. At the center of this collection is a really long sequence about jellyfish. And I think I share with both Barokka and Jenna a kind of fascination with oceanic imagery and aquatic life. And really early in lockdown, I think this was last spring, I saw footage of a jellyfish just gliding along a canal in Venice. And it was so serene and it was so alien and so beautiful and so otherworldly. And that image really haunted me. And I imagine, non-poets would be like, oh, that was cool, and move on. But this turned into an entire sequence about jellyfish, written from the perspective of jellyfish. So I think I'll read one or two poems from Bloom. It begins. Hemingway would record every detail of an event, say a bomb, and then take out the event and leave only the reverberations. That is as good a description of jellyfish as you'll get. Watch out for my rippling legs, a fry of glass eels drifting up the shore. We bloom like nuclear hydrangea. In certain light conditions, you won't notice until it's too late. Our iridescent bells marking out the radius of our poisonous reach. Boom. This year, we are startlingly large and daring. Cassandra. I hope you never have to know the lumens of a panicked jellyfish. I hope you never turn your body into a beacon to light signal fires along an ocean ridge. I hope your eyes never tire from keeping everything in your sight. I hope you never have to explain away your existence. I hope you never feel the need to snip a hole out of the present and slip through. I hope you never have a migraine open at your temples like an aurora. I hope you never have bioluminescent nightmares, the color of this country's threat level. I hope you never have to bear witness to what one jellyfish can do to another. I hope you never feel unsafe in your own body of water. Night is dark enough as it is. And for my last poem, I'll read Moon Jelly's Escape, which is about an actual historical event that's pretty wild. Just a little bit of context. In 1991, NASA sent about 60,000 moon jellyfish up into space. They didn't do so well. They developed vertigo and abnormal swimming problems, as you can imagine. But this poem really reimagines if the moon jellies made a break for it. This is the last poem. Moon Jelly's Escape. We launched ourselves out of the airlock, plotted in uprising, bolts of iridescent moon jellies lunging into space like blue greyhounds, daring and unstoppable, hollering in light. We who were bred in zero gravity and artificial seawater dreamed of this moonshot escape. Bloom loosened, troop of moonlets marveling at the instinctive pull towards any lunar body we could call our own. So many of us that a blue nebula was visible on Earth at high noon. For one moment, people stopped, the whole world tipping its head back in wonder. Blue is such an inadequate word for what happened that day. Ultramarine, lapis lazuli neon, holy sassafrato blue, wet voltage blue, heavens the color of the hottest part of the flame. Houston, there are 60,000 moons in the sky right now, and each one you're doing. Maybe that's why the moon is moving away from the earth a few centimeters every year, to make room for your hubris. The collective noun for us is an astonishment. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for coming to my launch. It's such an honor to read with all of you. And thank you, Jane.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's an absolute delight to hear you read what divine poems and poems that bridge distances, that bridge longing and loss in all different kinds of ways. They're such a magnificent, imaginative, and so full of scope and depth. While our wonderful audience are thinking of questions that they might like to ask of our wonderful poets this evening, I'm just going to bring all of the poets back onto the screen together. So Jenna and Oka, if that's okay, I will invite you to join us again. And I've got a question to sort of kick things off a little bit, if that's okay, Cynthia. I wanted to ask, well, I might ask two questions if there's time. First of all, to sort of ask you about the process of particularly writing the poems that look at those depths. That's a really interesting thing, that both space and the depths of the ocean and all of these things that are far away and deep and inaccessible became an imaginative space for you, both in terms of lockdown and of writing during this very strange period we've been through of isolation. You know, why those particular spaces sort of perhaps appealed to sort of imaginatively inhabit at that point for you as a poet.
Sure. I mean, as I said, I think a lot of these poems were written very, very quickly in a very intense fashion during lockdown. I was living by myself, and I felt quite distant, you know, from everyone that I loved. And I remember reading an interview with the poet, oh my goodness, Morgan Parker. And I think she talks about how her writing process is about overwhelming herself. So she has music on, she has the radio on, she has articles, she has books open all over the place. And it felt like exploring some of those far off distant spaces was almost a way of leaning into the discomfort of saying, it feels like we're in a really strange space. It feels like we're in a really strange time. How might I reimagine some of that? And then I saw the footage of the jellyfish and it felt like everything sort of locked into place. But yeah, I think really just leaning into some of that discomfort and some of those liminal spaces felt like that's actually where, at the fringes, the book feels like it really kind of comes into its own only by looking at those liminal spaces.
Thanks, Cynthia. And something I'll first of all perhaps mention in terms of honorifics, but it would also be brilliant if Jenna and Oka would like to contribute as well to this. Just in terms of form, I should say that for our viewers at home, that this book really plays about with form in a whole variety of ways. That's just one example, but one that for me, as somebody who typesets the books as well, has been quite an adventure. So some of you might be familiar with this poem, which I think was in the Birmingham Literature Journal last year as well, Glitch Honorifics, which in part gave its title to the title of the book. It was really interesting working with these poems formally on the page and thinking about how they would sometimes practically fit into the book and how we would represent them. So what role does form play for you in terms of, and I think Jane Ye brought this out in her endorsement for the book about playfulness, the formal adventurousness of the poems. What for you is that kind of connection between that formal play and the poem that comes out of it?
I think it's absolutely critical. I don't think the poems would have emerged in the same way if I hadn't explored and kind of pushed and tinkered with different types of form. I think Glitch Honorifics in particular, and yeah, apologies to Jane for having to typeset this particular nightmare. I think where it really started was the sense of, I knew that I wanted to create almost like, as I think Jenna, as you call it, like little puzzles on the page. I found myself really frustrated by the 2D-ness of the page and of Word and of InDesign. And I was almost quite frustrated that I couldn't fall deeper into that page. And so I think I started playing around, almost prototyping with Post-its and then with cut out bits of paper, trying to see if I could assemble something that felt a little bit more three-dimensional. And it felt like once I had those boxes. I think I initially did like a little test run in PowerPoint with like text boxes stacked on top of each other. It felt like once I had that framework in my head, the poem kind of flowed from there. I think both Glitch Honorifics and Homecoming, which is that poem that sort of reads in those three parallels, I was trying to play with the idea of a family tree or of timelines that kind of move through both different generations of a family, and then how that might branch and twist and glitch almost over time. And I was really interested in how, by troubling that sense of time and by troubling that sense of that third dimension, interesting different things pop out. So yeah, I think they're intricately linked, form and poetry. I don't think that these poems would have appeared otherwise. I don't know if that's a very articulate answer to your very articulate question.
No, it's really interesting. I think that idea of form as part of the generative process of writing and creating poetry is really interesting. And I'm always sort of interested in people's process and how the poems happen. How is it for you, Jenna and Oka? What role does form sort of play for you in terms of the work and the poems, and where they sort of emerge and where they go to sometimes as well?
I suppose I'll go, if that's okay. Yeah, I think I really like to play with the reader's expectations, and I like to see my poems as a bit of a game of like how much I can get away with. So in my book there are like prose poems that kind of just fill up the page, and I suppose it's like a game of patience. How much will the reader take from me? But also about kind of pushing what a poem can do, what we expect poems to do, and I find Cynthia's play with form so innovative and inspiring. And I actually remember, I was just thinking as you were talking, Cynthia, about how in that first lockdown we were both kind of feeling quite creatively stuck. And then I sent you a picture of Franny Choi's Soft Science, and she's got this kind of grid kind of play, like game, like puzzle, like poem. And I sent this to, I think you were saying like I really want to play with form, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And a lot of the poems in Museum of Ice Cream are kind of riffs off Franny Choi, so I owe a lot to Franny Choi. But yeah, it's really about kind of pushing what a poem can do, playing with it, I think, and it feels so integral to the process of writing one too. That was a bit garbled, but there was something interesting in there. Franny Choi.
Franny Choi. I think on my end, it's kind of the opposite from Jenna's, in the sense that I realized in creating Ultimatum Orangutan that I think of poems as sound first, and I know the words. I'm like, okay, this is a full song, so to speak, like all the words are here. And it's people like Jane and poetry friends and mentors who, Jane, you constantly were telling me like, think about form, push form, play around with form, because I was like, the words are all there. This is it, no more edits. But then I was like, oh, this actually, so I owe a lot to Nine Arches in terms of me experimenting more. And I think that's an element of me coming from performance originally, right? And then having to translate things onto the page and realizing, oh, there's all these dimensions. And speaking of dimensions, I truly see Honorifics as a sci-fi collection. I fully see it, and it should be adapted, and it should be, yeah, just the imagery is so intense and wonderful. Jellyfish in space, etc. Yeah.
Sci-fi opera, definitely.
I'm totally here for that. We'll chat. That'll be the next book.
Next stage, isn't it? Right. Okay. Get writing that funding application now. This is the future. Fabulous. That's a really lovely response from everybody, and it's just really interesting seeing all of these different ways in which we can approach and inhabit and play with form. It's there for us to kind of, encounter in all that variety of ways. We've got some lovely questions coming in for our audience, so I'm going to go straight to those. Next question is from Jane Byrne, who says, hello, wonderful readings. When did you all know that your collections were finished and all in the right order? When was that decided? What was it that decided you, and are you still sure now? That's a fantastic question.
Oh man, that is quite a question. When did I know that my collection was finished? I think I worked on it in sort of two really intense bursts, and I think I knew it was finished when I feel like one, I knew I had to send it to you, Jane. I knew that you were waiting on me for it, so I was like, right, get it out of my computer and into Jane's inbox. Um, but I could feel kind of towards the end of putting the collection together that it felt like I was tapering off. It felt like I had sort of said everything that I needed to say. As for the right order, very much echoing what Aka says, it was only in the very capable and sure hands of Jane Kamain that when you sort of looked at the entire epic of the collection and you were able to spot patterns and themes and that kind of thread through it, that I think because you're so close to it as the poet, you just almost can't see the wood for the trees. It was almost when I had to step back and I had to, well, I didn't have a printer, otherwise I would have done that thing where you like print everything out and shuffle it around on your floor. But it was only when I was seeing it from your perspective and you said, actually, it feels like there's some interesting arcs and themes happening here. Let's stitch it together in this way, that it felt finally complete. I don't think it's ever finished. I think I have to park it for now, otherwise I'll keep tinkering forever. Yeah. What about you guys? How did you know?
I think my answer pretty much mirrors yours. I remember actually writing the last poem in Museum of Ice Cream and thinking that's it. I'm like I knew that was the last one that had got out everything I wanted to say. And that's not to mean I didn't go back and edit quite a lot, but I was actually editing up to about like a week before the manuscript had to be done, and actually on the phone panicking to you, Cynthia, and being like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. But I think a lot of my process is just like chipping away at something until it feels right. But yeah, it's about having a feeling of I've said what I wanted to say on that topic for now. I'm sure that in a couple of years' time I'll feel like there's something else I want to say, or I want to approach this in a different way. But it felt like at that time it was ready, and I was happy to let it go.
Yeah, I'm just remembering, it's kind of incredible that I think it was a year ago that Cynthia and I swapped early manuscripts of Honorifics and Ultimate Orangutan. I'm just thinking how much each book has changed in a year, Cynthia. It's kind of incredible, and I'm gonna be looking back at those early drafts of our books now just to compare. I think for me it was a process of listening, and every time I felt like little whispers from like a creepy genre shift horror, like a little poem, like whispering to me. If I could still hear it a little bit, then I would tinker with it. And Jane, bless you for being incredibly patient with me as I continued to listen until I didn't hear anything anymore. And it was kind of the poems telling me, oh, we're complete, we're a full set. But yeah, as Jenna said, time and perspective will probably change how we feel about topics and themes. And yeah, it just kind of propels us onto the next thing, hopefully.
Thanks so much. Such really good answers to such a really interesting question. Our next question from Jane Pendry asks, interested to know your method in writing: notebooks or computers, scribbles in passing, time set aside, quiet or noisy?
I feel like I want to hear your guys' take on this first. I'm gonna throw it back over to you two.
Well, I write poems in very short bursts, and it's I have like a WhatsApp group that is just me. It's me talking to me. Recommend this for everybody, it's great. So I will just like text myself things, ideas, images, lines, and then those sometimes get put in a notebook, or like I sit down to write. But I started writing through a creative writing degree, and often through that it's like 20-minute burst write, 20-minute burst write, or like 10-minute burst write. And so my poetry writing mirrors that a lot. It's a quick burst, get a draft down, then come back and work on it later. I need absolute quiet. I need not to be disturbed. everything is a mess around me. And then eventually, hopefully, have some semblance of order. But I like to think of myself as like an agent of chaos in my own life, especially my own writing life. So like chaos everywhere.
Yeah, I love that answer. WhatsApp group to yourself. Pro tip, Jenna. That's great. We'll be trying that. Yeah, me, notebooks, computers, the notes app on my phone, the voice memos app on my phone. I will like say something like, oh, I saw this person on a train. I think I should write a poem about that or something, and then forget what it was when I listen back to it. But it's always the sense of like, oh, I'm so scared of ideas escaping. Because you know that moment just before bed when you thought of like 3 ideas over the back of your head and you're like, oh, and I'm so tired. And in the morning you're like, no, where were they? Where did they go? So always trying to, yeah, record.
I feel like what's really evident in all 3 of our methods is urgency and chaos, that sense of like, I need to grab hold of something before it goes. And I think the WhatsApp group with yourself is genius. I'm totally stealing that. I think as for myself, it feels like lots of very quick little scribbles. I feel like I've had to train myself to write very, very quickly, whether it's through kind of the practice of writing workshops or attending courses where you're just fed like rapid fire prompts every 10, 15 minutes. And so you can't necessarily write an entire poem, but you're writing lots of initial starting points and kind of little bits of kindling. And so I feel like a lot of my practice is just gathering up these little bits and pieces into like a really long Word document or notes app or Evernote file. And then when it comes to feeling like, I think I've got enough here from the various debris of various poems to kind of stitch them together, see what emerges, cut bits, put them all together. I don't think there's a process. I think it's just chaos. I think it's just moving through chaos until you feel like you have something that maybe resonates. And I think some of the fragments of these poems have been like lingering in a Monica cupboard of poetry for years until I think sort of last year or last summer, I opened that cupboard and I was like, right, I think I have to deal with this now and just like gather everything up and make sense of it. But I think there's something to that, trying to like grab those little glimpses of fragments of phrases before they escape. Yeah, I really like that kind of process.
So sort of poetry is a way of decluttering. Poetry is from chaos to order. Poetry is a way of bringing all the fragments of WhatsApp sort of themed brains into something that makes a whole sense, because you bring all of these parts together and somehow the joining of them makes something that just clicks. And that's how you know when it's finished. It clicks. It kind of connects that earlier question as well, doesn't it? This is wonderful. We've probably got time for one more question, because I'd also like to invite Cynthia to read us a final poem for this evening as well. So I'm going to go to Suna Ashfan's question. Thank you, Suna. She says, for Cynthia, there are so many migrations in this collection across time, space, nations, relationships. I'd like to ask what her feelings are on poems migrating to readers.
That's a really beautiful question. I think it's sort of inevitable that the poems themselves will transform and change in their journey to readers. I wouldn't ever dare think that the vision that I had for a poem or the meaning that I had will just arrive perfect and untarnished in the minds of the readers as they read it. I think there's something inevitable about transformation that happens in that journey, and I think that's kind of part and parcel of these poems. That's just such a beautiful question. I don't really know how to do it justice, if I'm honest, Suna. Yeah, I think I'll probably leave it at that sense that I hope that some aspect of the tenderness and kind of love that was part of the poem's genesis sort of arrives with those readers. And to Aka's point earlier, I'm sure that our relationship, or my relationship certainly, to these poems will shift and change over time. So no doubt the relationship that the readers have with these poems might shift and change over time as well. Yeah.
That feels like a really wonderful place to leave it. And what a great question. Tenderness, transformation, connection, all of these things are at the very heart of why we write poetry, and why we as readers also receive and, you know, become connected to poetry as well. It's that continual process. And I love that idea of, you know, transformation, that it arrives, but it's not necessarily, you know, we bring our own things to it. It's such an interesting question to also explore, almost more than we would have time for this evening. But I'd like to thank every viewer and everybody who's joined us on YouTube this evening for all of your wonderful questions, for all of your comments. It's been just really wonderful to know that you're all out there. To Cynthia Miller and her wonderful book Honorifics, if you do order it this evening, we do have just a couple of the book plated copies left with these beautiful book plates in. So if you would like one of those and you place an order this evening, I will try to make sure that you get one of those while stocks last. My hearty thank yous to Khairani, Barokka, to Jenna Clake for your wonderful, wonderful readings this evening. To Cynthia also for your wonderful reading. It was just such a joy, and we're going to hear one more poem from you shortly. A thank you also to my wonderful colleague Angela, who is behind the scenes, connecting everything up between YouTube and Zoom where we are, and keeping all of the things moving tonight. Apologies for an earlier little bit of a technical glitch, but we've had a wonderful event, a lovely evening. It's just been so great to celebrate the arrival of your book, Cynthia, and we're absolutely delighted at Nine Arches Press to be publishing it. A huge thank you again to everybody, and I will now hand over to Cynthia, who's going to read us one final poem. We'll then wave good nights and we will bid you adieu. But Cynthia, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Jane. And thank you so much to everyone out there listening to these poems, and to the guest readers. Thank you for being here. It is really such an honor. I'm going to close with the last poem in the collection. Speaking of voice notes and of poems migrating over great distances, this is voicemails from my mother. An old story, one you know. Once a snake ate my cat, so my second brother killed it dead and made snake ball soup for the whole family. Maybe next time our table will be bigger. Next time, a snake big enough to feed the street. Remember, I taught you which palms to drink from, how to pinch thin moons of dough around the filling. I am running out of time to tell you everything. I can't, for the life of me, remember what I called to say. Don't be stupid. No one died of homesickness. What a waste a one-way ticket would be. Sayang, I'm sorry if I woke you up. Sayang, everything here tastes different. Fish fried in black oil and Maggi magic syrup. Missy brought her youngest daughter to lunch today. You know Isabel, the one at Yale. She reminded me of you, or perhaps you are still that way. I thought I'd spend a year here, but fruit trees take a year to yield anything. I'm going out to the field today. The light is doing something new, and it's time for planting. Sayang, everything that's dead is just fertilizer. All I need, I can carry in my hands. I liked me best when I chose to leave. What I took with me, who I left, there at the border, squinting a little, raising a hand. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been just a wonderful evening, and we're just going to give you a little round of Zoom applause, Cynthia, for that wonderful reading tonight. That is the end of our event. So good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's been such a joy to have you as our audience. We hope you very much have enjoyed tonight, and please do support these poets and their books and their publications. And thank you again for joining us, and good night, everybody. Take care. Bye.